Hello, everybody.
Something's got to be switched.
Yeah. What do we need to do to press? Laptop, is it? Yes, that's right.
Okay. Who's seen The Shining? Okay. For the rest of you, there's going to be some stuff in this presentation that makes absolutely zero sense whatsoever, but the best recommendation I can give you is go and watch The Shining. So, I'm going to talk about maps, but in the context of just some silly reference to this particular film. The fantastic psychological horror flick, The Shining, by Stanley Kubrick, 1980. Right, who wasn't born in 1980? There we go, that's probably going to tell us more. And it's obviously based on the book by Stephen King from the late 70s, starring Jack Nicholson and the late Shelley Duvall. So really this is just a way of me, there's going to be some bad puns, reflecting on using shiny stuff on maps, which I've been experimenting with in the last couple of years. And I've actually just been having a chat with someone over lunch saying, how do you come up with your ideas? And that's really the context of this presentation, which is inspiration from a map can come from many, many different places, particularly when you're making one-off maps about thematic detail or one-off events or something else that perhaps captures the attention in the news or in the news cycle or so on. So I'm going to touch on the idea of historical context mixed with timeliness of events, serendipity, motive, snow, sun, moon, and all sorts of other stuff. Okay, let's see if the sound works. There you go. So, by way of context, and in about 10 seconds flat, thematic mapping has a very long, varied history. Here's some maps from the 1800s, generally a period in time which was characterised by inventions of various forms of thematic mapping representation. So all of the sort of the techniques that we know and love today, choropleth, dot density, etc., we can show lineage back to the 1800s. The 1900s, generally, that was a period that was most commonly seen as where experimentation came to the fore. Maps became more artisanal. There was a bit more flair and a bit more style involved. They were more colourful, partly due to print technology. Atlases became commonplace. And towards the mid-end of the century, computer graphics started coming to the fore and became increasingly used. And in some senses, I guess quality moved back a little bit at that time. It was, though, a time when AI meant ArcInfo or Adobe Illustrator. So that shows you something about what AI means to me. Coming up to date a little bit more, 2000s and beyond, the paper-to-screen revolution continues. There's much more one-off pieces rather than series of maps, of thematic maps. A lot more data journalism. We'll hear a little bit more about that later. Perhaps more attention-grabbing graphics, things to draw you in and get you to want to spend some time with the map. The rise of the slippy map, animated, interaction, scrolly telling, live data feeds, and so on and so forth. And all these have required adaptations of our cartographic lineage, but they broadly all sort of follow on from the maps from the 1800s and so on. So actually, most techniques are by and large fairly well developed. I think what we're seeing now with a lot of maps is innovation is very hard to find. There's a lot of repetition, but it's about trying to tease out something interesting within your thematic mapping technique to bring an audience to your map. And that's not been easy with the different shifts across time that we've seen. Many in this room can sort of find a particular period along that timeline of where they started their journey in cartography. My journey is the white dotted line after I graduated in 1991, just when GIS was killing cartography. If ever you did a degree at the wrong time, that was it. I've been trying to catch up ever since. But we've seen an awful lot of shift, and many more folks now make maps than ever before. And that's kind of my job. I make maps to test software, to abuse it, to break it, hopefully to make something interesting, to write workflows for people to look at, follow, copy, and to understand what they could do with the software, as opposed to just what they can do out of the box with the defaults. And I also write books which are still available for sale. I'm not going to mention that too often. Okay, so let's start off with Snowflakes. I use this word in America and don't often... it doesn't go down that well. I'm going to talk about snowflakes. It's a bit better over here. Anyway, snowflakes. This is me in 2006 on vacation. I go on vacation and tend to do work at the same time, but I call it vacation. So this is me trundling down a slope, Breckenridge, Colorado, with a Trimble device, and I'm collecting track logs, and then I turn them into maps. And at the time, this was an attempt to sort of challenge the classic ski map of the time, the panorama, the beautiful painted panorama, which I love. But I thought, well, I wonder if I can make a tube map out of it, which I did, which no one loves because they all love the panorama map, and I get it, I agree. But it kind of gives you an illustration to how my silly mappy mind works. It's like, right, I'm going to do something, or something's happened, can I make a map out of it? And I don't just want to make a map, I want to make something interesting and different and possibly challenging to the standard or the conventions. And so fast forward to 2022-23, and this happened in my back garden in California. It's called snow, and this is a very rare event in California, but the US had a very record snow year in that particular period, and it was just about everywhere in California. Okay, so that's data, and it's interesting because it's something out of the ordinary. That's my fire pit called global warming. And this is my dog, who wondered also what the hell that was falling out of the sky. Never seen it before. What do I do with it? I'll just stare at it, then I'll go back inside. So circumstances go a long way to determining what I'm going to make a map of. Okay, and you can take nice pictures of the front garden, which I'll show you later. I then happened across some work by this chap, Wilson Bentley, otherwise known as Snowflake Bentley. Not because he's a snowflake, but he was a meteorologist who took microphotographs of snowflakes and created albums of them. Absolutely fascinating things. He became very famous for these microphotographs, and he photographed over 5,000 snowflakes and is largely credited with the person who said, well, I've never seen two that are alike. And the reason I came across his work is because the National History Museum here in London digitised one of his publications from 1899, happened across this in late 2022, just as snow was falling in California, and I've now got two things that are leading me to think this might be an idea for a map. So I tend to keep this scrapbook of design ideas in the back of my head. You know, I'll pass a shop window and there'll be a design idea. I've heard some discussion today about something that someone was talking to someone else about. I accidentally overheard, and I can guarantee I'm going to make a map of that idea. Thank you very much. There'll be credit given duly. So timing was everything. I had the data, I had these microphotographs, I had an idea and record snowfall. And I had a rainbow-coloured map and thought, well, we can make better than this. A little bit unfair on the National Data Service to criticise this. It's just a portal to the data, as opposed to being a fully formed map, cartographic style product, designed, I guess we'd say. So, available for download the data, thank you very much. And went back to Bentley's digitised atlas from the museum. Freely available for reuse. Perfect. So I've got the raw materials, and I just went through and selected 100 of my favourite snowflakes, just the ones I like the most. But I wanted to go from ones that were full and fluffy, basically mostly white, to sort of light and wispy, basically mostly background. And you can probably see where I'm going here. I'm going from a sort of a light to a dark and creating almost a colour gradient just by simply the use of negative space in the symbology. Now this was all done in Photoshop. I wouldn't recommend it, but several days later I had 100 photographs because they all had to be slightly manipulated, because I'm going to make a hex bin map and they've all got to fit in the hexagons, broadly speaking, the same. So Bentley said no two snowflakes are the same. These are in size and shape, but who cares? Only you care. So I made this sort of general sweeping legend. Less to more total accumulation of snow over the year, varied by size and transparency, just because I can, because the software allows me to do it, and it looks cool, and that's as justifiable a reason as you're going to get. And then you end up with a sort of a hex binned map that looks a bit like that. So you can generally get the idea where the most snowfall is and where the least snowfall is across the map. So each snowflake is basically a symbol, a proportional symbol with some extra sort of visual variables thrown in. And so I created this map, and I showed you the photograph earlier from my front yard because that's where I used it on the actual map, because guess what? I took it, it's copyright free. Brilliant. So, I was able to sort of put that on the front there and call it Californian Snowflakes, which again is a title that a lot of people don't like, but I like puns, so that's what I did. And there's the legend, which I've already showed you. Now you can see as I'm sort of scrolling through the map, there's nothing else. So the pattern of California is shown through the symbols itself. And I kind of like that because it's a little bit different. It proves you don't always need base data, which therefore also means you don't necessarily need copyrighted data to sit behind your map. Sometimes the data is the map. And at the bottom, just because I had a spare corner in the bottom left, stick a graph in there, it fills up space, lovely. Don't look at it too carefully, that graph, because I wanted it to make it look like falling snow. But shouldn't graphs have solid columns to the... Yes, they should. So I made the map, and then I thought, I want to play with it. I want to make it shiny. Okay, this is when I hunted for a printer that would help me get this. I wanted to make the snowflakes shimmer, so I was going to print those in Pantone silver. Our spot colours have a long use in cartography for things like contours, when it's very difficult to register the four-colour printing process, so that the line is going to be perfectly coloured with the different colours. So I went with a spot colour here, it was silver, and I also wanted a UV gloss overlay as well, just a shimmer for all those areas that had over 100 inches of snow. So I had to create 3 plates for my printer, and they did a fantastic job. It looks great, photos don't do it justice, but there's silver symbols and a nice shimmery sort of UV gloss. So, why am I showing you this from The Shining? Because that's beautiful hex carpet in the Overlook Hotel. Anyway, so Sun and the Moon. 2023 annular eclipse. I hate pie charts. Lots of people hate pie charts. Lots of people love pie charts. Depending on which side of the fence you sit on, there are different ways of creating part-to-whole relationships in a symbol, such as these, which are moon pie symbols, really developed by Robert Cassara, who was at Tableau Research at the time. And I used this map as a way to create a style file for anybody who uses ArcGIS Pro, where you can use moon pie symbology now instead of pie symbology. Great. So that's the reason I told work I was making this map. And I ended up making this, which was of the annular eclipse. I kind of made this in about 6 hours, one night, whilst at the NACIS conference, which is the equivalent of this, in the US last October. Just because I thought, well, hang on, it's the eclipse tomorrow, and I need a map. I've got to have a map of it. So I sat in the hotel all night and made that. So this is basically a map that shows wherever you're sort of at in the US. It shows the sort of azimuth and the obscuration of the sun by the moon at that particular point with a path of annularity. So this is not totality, this is near totality, going across the sort of southwest US. There's a little bit of maths involved to calculate this. If you really want to know what it is, I'll be in a bar tonight, and after a couple of pints, I'll try and remember what on earth I did. But there's a bit of maths involved. And then I thought, well, that kind of... Wait a minute a sec. That's not in The Shining. It's a better film, though. Anyway, it's a film with two suns. So what do you do when you've done an idea once? You repeat it. So I thought for the total eclipse, I would create the same map, effectively. I went from a regular grid to an offset grid because R.J. Andrews, Info We Trust, if you know him, suggested it would look better, and I'm all for taking advice, and he was correct. And I played around with it a little bit. So there's 1,500 small vignettes there. But I wanted to boost it a little bit. I wanted to sort of take it to 11. So I did the same thing. I created a spot gloss mask for the path of totality. I created a mask for all the areas where the sun is shown rather than obscured. And I took it back to the printer and said, I've got another idea. You're going to love it. I want the gloss thing again, but instead of Pantone silver, I want gold foil. He then prepared the invoice. And a slight side story, I said, he said, the printing machine's going to print off at least 100. He said, we're going to print go, and then by the time we hit stop, it's whipped off 100. I said, I want 10. I want 10 with the gold foil treatment, given what you've just quoted me. He says, no problem, we'll just do that, and you can have any extra. You can have the overrun and just take them away. They'll just be lithographs. Great. He phoned me up the following Tuesday, and he said, we've got a problem with your map. All right, what's the problem? He said, the guys who were putting the gold foil on didn't get the memo. So you've got everything with gold foil on. And I'm now sweating, thinking I've got to sell the house. He said, you're all right, we're not going to charge you. Do you still want them? Yes, I do, thank you very much. So I've got about 200 of these things to get rid of. I've got a few here. But it's just using gold foil to get a shiny look on the map. And if you use a decent matte and you frame it in a nice colour, it's a nice thing to stick on the wall. So I totally agree with Vivian that we should have more printed maps. Yeah, there we go. And my company very helpfully printed it at 14 feet wide for our recent conference, and it looked fantastic on a wall. I could not persuade them, despite the owner's deep pockets, to put gold foil on this particular version. So that's kind of where I'm at. And just to sort of throw a few silly final little words at you, whereby I normally try and enthuse people about mapping. Defaults. Avoid them. Just don't go to defaults. Try and do something different. Deliberate. Think. Then think some more. Then think some more before you commit your ideas to paper. Try and deliver your best work, not just work. Delight. Try to create something worthy that people want to spend time with. Try to direct people, to educate them. I write blogs and workflows so that people can follow what I've done or download styles and so on and so forth. Try to dazzle people, literally in this case because it just catches your eye. But be inspirational perhaps with the work that you're sharing. Do good deeds, share for the community. Be dependable, map truthfully. I guarantee all those suns on that map are pointed in the right direction because I did due diligence to make sure they were. And try to make your work distinctive at least, or sign it, make it stand out, make it yours, make it authoritative. And you'll notice this is a still from the film towards the end of Jack Nicholson in character at the Overlook Hotel, the July the 4th ball. So by final way of pun, don't overlook these ideas. Your map readers will have a ball. So that's the focus of my work. Everything I do is up on this kind of website that I've got where you can download the maps, catch some talks. Oh look, there's a couple of books, and so on. And that is pretty much the dead end of the talk. You don't have to make your map physically shine, and I've probably done that to death now myself, but don't make them dull. Otherwise, they're going to be dead to the world. Thank you very much for letting me have a little go.
Thank you very much, Ken.
It's my pleasure. Oh, I've got some maps to give away, but Paul's going to announce that later. He said just announcing it.
Okay then. Right. So our next speaker is Ahmad Bartley from the Office of National Statistics, and he'll be talking about visualizing census data.